What if the biggest mistake you've been making with manipulators isn't trusting the wrong people, but reacting exactly the way they hoped you would? Most people believe that standing up to a manipulator means confronting them, exposing their lies, or proving everyone else wrong. It sounds courageous, it feels satisfying, but according to psychology, that's often the moment you hand them control, because the truth is unsettling. Manipulators don't fear your anger, they depend on it. Every emotional reaction gives them information, every explanation gives them leverage, and every impulsive decision pulls you deeper into a game you never realized you were playing. Machiavelli understood something that most people still ignore today. Power doesn't belong to the person who speaks the loudest or fights the hardest. It belongs to the one who remains impossible to read, while everyone else is busy defending themselves, explaining their intentions, and reacting to every provocation. The truly dangerous person is quietly observing, thinking several moves ahead, and allowing others to reveal themselves first. That's where psychological warfare is won. Not through force, but through patience. Have you ever walked away from a conversation wondering why you explained yourself so much? Or replayed an argument in your mind, wishing you had simply stayed calm instead of trying to prove your point? Almost everyone has. The frustrating part is that manipulators count on those moments. They know that when emotions rise, judgment falls, and once they understand your fears, your need for approval, or your emotional triggers, manipulation becomes much easier than you could imagine. But here's the good news. Every tactic they use has a weakness. You don't need to become colder, crueler, or more manipulative to protect yourself. You simply need to become harder to predict. Through emotional control, strategic silence, and a deeper understanding of human psychology, you can quietly remove the very tools manipulators rely on. The battle changes completely when they can no longer read your next move. In this video, you'll discover 7 timeless rules inspired by Machiavelli that reveal how to recognize manipulation before it traps you, protect your mind without creating unnecessary conflict, and develop the kind of calm authority that manipulators instinctively avoid. Because once you stop reacting, stop explaining, and start thinking strategically, you'll realize something surprising. The greatest victory isn't defeating manipulators. It's making sure they never gain power over you again. Most people believe the best way to defeat a manipulator is to expose them immediately. That sounds brave, but it rarely works. A skilled manipulator has already shaped the story before anyone else even realizes there's a game being played. That's why psychology teaches that perception often matters more than facts. Someone who reacts too quickly usually ends up defending themselves instead of revealing the truth. As Machiavelli understood, the person who controls appearances often controls the battlefield long before the first argument begins. Manipulation rarely starts with lies alone. It begins with small emotional tests that seem harmless at first. A sarcastic joke, a subtle guilt trip, an innocent-looking question. Each one measures how predictable someone is. If the target becomes defensive, angry, or desperate to explain themselves, the manipulator quietly collects valuable information. That's psychological warfare at its most effective because the battle happens inside the mind before it ever reaches the outside world. Ironically, the loudest reaction often becomes the strongest weapon against the person who gave it. Imagine someone at work constantly making subtle comments designed to provoke frustration. Most people try to win by confronting them in front of everyone, but that usually gives the manipulator exactly what they wanted: visible emotion. Instead, a calm response, a brief acknowledgement, or even strategic silence forces the other person to keep pushing harder until their own behavior becomes obvious. It's almost funny how people expecting fireworks become confused when they're met with complete composure instead. That's when the balance of power quietly begins to shift. The biggest mistake isn't trusting the wrong person. It's believing every battle has to be fought the moment it appears. Real influence doesn't rush. Emotional control allows someone to separate immediate feelings from long-term consequences. Instead of asking, "How do I win this argument today?" wiser people ask, "How do I win this situation 6 months from now?" That simple shift changes every decision because impulsive victories often become expensive defeats later. The long game has always belonged to those who understand patience better than pride. There's another truth that many people don't want to hear. Manipulators survive because they convince others to dance to their rhythm. The moment someone becomes emotionally predictable, they're no longer making decisions. They're following invisible strings. Psychology repeatedly shows that predictable reactions are easy to exploit, while calm uncertainty creates hesitation in the minds of those trying to control others. In many ways, manipulation depends less on intelligence and more on emotional predictability. Remove that predictability, and the entire strategy starts falling apart. This is where Machiavelli's wisdom becomes surprisingly practical. He never admired reckless confrontation nearly as much as calculated observation. Before making any move, he understood the value of learning how people reveal themselves when they believe nobody sees the game they're playing. The smartest response isn't always action. Sometimes it's careful observation wrapped in strategic silence. And once someone learns to watch without announcing what they've discovered, an entirely different level of psychological warfare quietly begins to unfold. One of the greatest mistakes people make is believing they should let a manipulator know they've figured everything out. It feels satisfying for a moment, almost like claiming victory before the game is over. But experienced manipulators don't panic when they're exposed. They adapt. They simply change tactics, wear a different mask, and begin collecting new information. That's why Machiavelli repeatedly favored observation over unnecessary revelation. In psychology, the person who understands the game without announcing it almost always holds the stronger position. There's a quiet strength in pretending not to notice every little move. That doesn't mean becoming naive or allowing manipulation to continue unchecked. It means refusing to reveal the map inside your own mind. Think about a poker player who smiles regardless of the cards they're holding. Opponents don't fear the player with the best hand. They fear the one they can't read. Strategic silence works the same way. Every unnecessary explanation, emotional confession, or impulsive reaction gives away clues that can later be used against you. Manipulators are naturally curious about people's fears, dreams, insecurities, and ambitions. They rarely ask direct questions because that would seem suspicious. Instead, they'll casually steer conversations toward personal topics, waiting for someone to volunteer information. A simple comment like, "I've always been afraid of disappointing people," may sound harmless in the moment. Later, however, that same fear can become the pressure point they repeatedly press. Psychology reminds us that information is never just information. In the wrong hands, it becomes leverage disguised as understanding. This doesn't mean living behind walls or refusing to trust anyone. Trust is essential, but genuine trust is earned over time through consistency, not charming words or quick emotional connections. A wise person allows people to reveal who they are before revealing who they truly are. For example, instead of sharing every personal goal with someone you've just met, let time test whether their actions match their promises. Emotional control isn't about becoming cold. It's about learning that timing matters just as much as honesty. Many people unknowingly sabotage themselves because they feel uncomfortable with silence. When a conversation pauses, they rush to fill the gap with stories, explanations, or private details. Ironically, that discomfort often benefits the manipulator more than anyone else. Strategic silence creates space for observation instead of exposure. It's amazing how much someone will reveal simply because the other person remains relaxed and says very little. Sometimes, the strongest answer isn't another sentence. It's letting the silence invite the truth to speak first. Over time, this habit creates something incredibly valuable: unpredictability. Manipulators begin realizing they can't easily identify your weaknesses, emotional triggers, or deepest motivations. They start making guesses instead of calculations. And that's a dangerous position for someone who depends on certainty. Machiavelli understood that hidden intentions are often more powerful than visible ones because they deny opponents the ability to prepare. And once your inner world is no longer available for others to study, the next lesson becomes even more important: what to do when they inevitably try to provoke your emotions instead. Before we move on, I need to tell you something. If what you've heard so far has opened your eyes to how manipulation really works, and you've realized how often people influence your emotions without you even noticing, then don't stop with this video. That's exactly why I created the Silent Influence Code, an ebook inspired by timeless Machiavellian principles and modern psychology. Inside, you'll discover practical strategies to recognize manipulation before it traps you, master emotional control, protect your personal information, become unreadable, and quietly build the kind of influence that commands respect without saying a word. If you're serious about taking back control instead of being controlled, click the link in the pinned comment and get your copy now. It could completely change the way you see every conversation and every relationship from this day forward. Most manipulators aren't trying to control your decisions first. They're trying to control your emotions. Once they can predict your anger, your fear, your guilt, or your need for approval, your choices become easier to influence. That's why psychology places such importance on emotional control. The strongest person in the room isn't the loudest or the most intimidating. It's the one who refuses to let someone else dictate their emotional state. As Machiavelli understood, mastering yourself is the foundation for mastering any situation. A manipulator expects emotional momentum. They push, you react. They accuse, you defend yourself. They criticize, you rush to prove your worth. It's a rhythm they've practiced countless times. But the moment someone responds with calm curiosity instead of emotional urgency, the rhythm breaks. A simple pause before answering, a measured tone, or even strategic silence can create enough uncertainty to make the manipulator question their own approach. Psychological warfare often shifts in favor of the person who remains emotionally unavailable to provocation. Imagine a family member who constantly makes passive-aggressive remarks during gatherings, hoping to spark an argument. Most people either explode or quietly carry resentment for days afterward. But someone with emotional control does something different. They acknowledge the comment without feeding it, change the subject naturally, or simply smile and move on. At first, it seems like nothing happened. In reality, everything changed. The manipulator expected emotional fuel and instead encountered a wall that couldn't be shaken. This kind of composure doesn't happen overnight. It comes from building the habit of separating feelings from actions. Feeling irritated is normal. Acting on that irritation without reflection is optional. A practical exercise is to delay important responses whenever emotions run high. Instead of replying immediately to a provocative message, wait until your breathing slows and your thoughts become clear. Psychology consistently shows that emotional intensity narrows judgment, while patience expands perspective. Sometimes, the smartest move is simply refusing to make one too soon. One of the greatest illusions is believing calmness means weakness. Manipulators count on that misconception because they mistake silence for surrender. But true calm isn't passive, it's controlled power. Think of a seasoned chess player who doesn't rush to capture every piece on the board. Every move serves a larger strategy. Manipulation loses much of its effectiveness when it can't produce urgency. That's why strategic silence often says more than 100 emotional explanations ever could. A composed mind forces impulsive people to reveal themselves. Over time, this discipline transforms more than individual conversations. It changes how others perceive you. People begin to notice that emotional pressure no longer works, that guilt no longer controls your decisions, and that chaos no longer dictates your behavior. Even skilled manipulators become hesitant because they can't predict which emotional button will produce a reaction. Machiavelli recognized that uncertainty weakens opponents far more effectively than confrontation. And once emotional reactions stop being their weapon, something remarkable begins to happen. Time itself starts working against them. One of the hardest lessons to accept is that not every lie needs an immediate response. Most people feel an overwhelming urge to defend themselves the moment they're misunderstood or falsely accused. That's exactly what manipulators expect. They know that emotional control becomes much harder when someone feels their reputation is under attack. But psychology teaches something surprising. Truth gains strength through consistency, while deception depends on constant maintenance. As Machiavelli observed, patience often accomplishes what force never could. Manipulators rarely destroy themselves with one dramatic mistake. Instead, they unravel through patterns. A contradiction here, a broken promise there, a story that changes ever so slightly each time it's told. The problem is that these cracks only become visible to people who are willing to watch long enough. Those who react impulsively often interrupt the process before the manipulator has the chance to reveal their true nature. In psychological warfare, timing can be more powerful than confrontation, because people trust what they discover for themselves far more than what they're told. Imagine trying to convince a friend that someone in your circle is dishonest. The more passionately you argue, the more defensive that friend may become. Now imagine taking a different approach. You stop campaigning, stop explaining, and simply allow reality to unfold. Weeks later, that same person notices broken promises, inconsistent stories, and subtle acts of manipulation without anyone pointing them out. The conclusion feels like their own, which makes it far more difficult to dismiss. Sometimes silence becomes the most convincing witness of all. This doesn't mean ignoring genuine harm or accepting abusive behavior. Healthy boundaries still matter, and stepping away from toxic situations is often the wisest choice. The difference is learning when to stop chasing validation from people who have already chosen not to see the truth. Emotional control means understanding that not everyone deserves an explanation, and not every misunderstanding requires a courtroom-style defense. Protecting your peace is often far more valuable than winning an argument you'll never truly win. Reputation works much like planting a tree. It grows slowly through repeated actions, steady character, and quiet consistency. A manipulator may appear convincing for a while because charm creates quick impressions. Character, however, survives the passing of time. Psychology consistently shows that people eventually compare words with behavior, especially when enough evidence accumulates naturally. That's why Machiavelli valued long-term credibility over short-term applause. The person who remains consistent rarely needs to convince others for very long. Eventually, something interesting happens. The manipulator begins working harder to maintain the illusion than you ever worked to defend yourself. Every new lie requires another. Every performance demands a larger audience, and every act of deception becomes more exhausting than the last. Meanwhile, your calm consistency quietly speaks louder than any accusation ever could. And once their influence starts fading on its own, the next challenge isn't exposing them anymore. It's removing their access to your life without creating unnecessary drama. One of the biggest misconceptions about dealing with manipulators is believing the final victory comes through a dramatic confrontation. It rarely does. In fact, explosive exits often provide exactly what manipulators crave: attention, emotional intensity, and one last opportunity to rewrite the story. Psychology shows that people who rely on manipulation feed on emotional engagement, whether it's positive or negative. Machiavelli understood that the most effective way to weaken an opponent is often to deny them the very resources they depend on. Think about how a fire behaves. Most people try to fight the flames directly, but experienced firefighters first remove the fuel. Manipulators work in much the same way. Their influence survives on emotional reactions, constant access, and predictable patterns of interaction. Once those elements begin to disappear, their ability to control the situation gradually weakens. Emotional control isn't only about staying calm during conflict. It's about refusing to keep supplying the emotional energy that allows unhealthy dynamics to continue. Instead of making a grand announcement that you're cutting someone out of your life, imagine becoming quietly less available. You respond less often. Stop volunteering personal information. Politely decline unnecessary invitations, and invest more time in people who consistently respect your boundaries. There's no dramatic speech, no public argument, no emotional showdown, just small, deliberate changes that slowly reshape the relationship. Strategic silence becomes especially powerful here because it leaves very little for the manipulator to fight against or twist into another story. At first, this approach can feel uncomfortable. Many people are conditioned to believe they owe everyone an explanation for every decision they make. But healthy boundaries don't require endless negotiations. If someone repeatedly ignores your limits, dismisses your concerns, or uses guilt as a tool for control, reducing access is not cruelty, it's wisdom. Psychology reminds us that trust is built through repeated respect, not repeated promises. The strongest boundaries are often the quiet ones that don't seek permission to exist. Another essential step is strengthening the people around you. Manipulators frequently try to isolate their targets because isolation makes influence much easier. That's why it's so important to build relationships with individuals who value honesty, accountability, and consistency. A trustworthy circle doesn't simply offer support during difficult moments. It also provides perspective when emotions become clouded. Machiavelli recognized that wise alliances create stability, while unreliable ones become hidden vulnerabilities waiting to be exploited through psychological warfare. Over time, something remarkable begins to happen. The manipulator discovers that old tactics no longer produce the same results. Emotional traps stop closing, and attempts to create chaos fall flat because there's no longer an audience willing to participate. Without realizing it, you've shifted from being reactive to becoming strategically untouchable. But reaching that level requires one final transformation: learning how to become so unreadable that manipulation loses its ability to predict, influence, or exploit you in the first place. The final stage of protecting yourself from manipulation isn't becoming stronger than every manipulator you'll ever meet. It's becoming so emotionally disciplined that they can no longer predict how you'll think, feel, or respond. That's a completely different level of power. Psychology has long shown that human beings naturally search for patterns because patterns make people easier to understand and easier to influence. Machiavelli recognized this centuries ago. The less predictable your behavior, the harder it becomes for others to build strategies around you. Being unreadable doesn't mean acting mysterious for the sake of appearances. It means learning the difference between privacy and secrecy. You don't have to announce every goal, explain every decision, or reveal every emotion the moment you experience it. The strongest people often carry quiet confidence instead of constant self-expression. Strategic silence isn't about hiding from the world. It's about choosing carefully what deserves to be shared and with whom. Every unnecessary explanation gives away a piece of your internal map. One practical habit is creating a pause between emotion and action. When someone pressures you for an immediate answer, resist the urge to respond simply because they expect it. A calm "I'll think about it" is often far more powerful than a rushed yes or no. That short pause protects your judgment from emotional pressure and reminds others that your decisions can't be rushed. Emotional control grows in those small moments that most people overlook. Ironically, the ability to delay a response often becomes the ability to avoid a mistake. Another powerful shift happens when observation becomes more important than performance. Instead of wondering how to impress people, start paying attention to how they behave when they gain nothing from being watched. Notice how they treat waiters, how they respond to criticism, whether their actions consistently match their words, and how they behave when someone else succeeds. Psychology reveals far more through repeated behavior than through polished conversations. The best judges of character spend less time talking and far more time noticing. There's also an unexpected freedom that comes with becoming emotionally self-sufficient. Manipulators often succeed because they discover what someone desperately needs: approval, validation, attention, certainty, or constant reassurance. When those needs are gradually met from within, instead of being outsourced to other people, many forms of manipulation lose their grip. Machiavelli understood that dependence creates vulnerability, while inner stability creates leverage. The less someone can emotionally buy from you, the less they can emotionally sell back to you. In the end, the greatest victory isn't proving that you're smarter than every manipulator you encounter. It's living in such a way that their strategies simply stop working. They can't predict your next move. They can't exploit your emotions, and they can't access the private parts of your mind that once made you vulnerable. Through psychology, emotional control, and strategic silence, you've transformed from an easy target into someone who quietly shapes the game instead of reacting to it. And that's the kind of strength that doesn't need to be announced, because everyone eventually notices it. If there's one lesson worth remembering from everything you've heard today, it's this: manipulators don't control people because they're unstoppable. They control people because most reactions are predictable. The moment you choose emotional control over impulse, strategic silence over unnecessary explanations, and observation over emotional confrontation, the balance of power begins to change. That's where real strength is born. Machiavelli understood that the greatest victories rarely look dramatic. They happen quietly, through patience, discipline, and a deep understanding of psychology. You don't need to win every argument. You don't need everyone to believe your side of the story. You simply need to become someone whose peace, judgment, and decisions can no longer be controlled through manipulation or emotional pressure. Now ask yourself honestly, how many times have you given someone power over your emotions without even realizing it? Which of these 7 rules challenged the way you usually respond to difficult people? And more importantly, what will you do differently the next time someone tries to provoke, guilt trip, or manipulate you? Share your answer in the comments. I'd love to know which rule had the biggest impact on your perspective and whether you've experienced a situation where staying calm completely changed the outcome. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. If you enjoyed this video and want to keep learning the timeless lessons of Machiavelli, psychology, emotional control, psychological warfare, and strategic silence, make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and turn on notifications. There are many more strategies ahead that can help you think more clearly, act more wisely, and become someone who is impossible to manipulate. Until the next video, stay observant, stay patient, and above all, stay in control.